At Hill Air Force Base, just after 0630, the supply warehouse stretched quiet and cavernous under the pale hum of overhead lights. Master Sergeant Elena Brooks moved between tall racks of crated equipment, clipboard in hand, every step measured and soundless on the polished concrete floor. Her olive flight jacket, well worn and softened by time, bore a patch on the right shoulder that no one could identify. A muted tangle of grays and black geometry that drew sidelong glances. Outside her world of inventory control and logistics precision, she was invisible. Among the daily bustle of lieutenants, techs, and enlisted crews, Elena kept her rhythm steady. Every number mattered. Every requisition had a place. Her pen scratched softly across the manifest sheet as she verified the latest incoming pallet of electrical connectors and maintenance kits, most tagged for an A-10 Warthog squadron rotating back through Nevada next week. At 0810, voices echoed down the long corridor that led from the admin wing. Lieutenant Colin Brenner's cadence was unmistakable, confident and clipped. He led a pack of cadets through the main aisle, their boots clattering louder than necessary, every gesture animated with authority. He called the space a hidden nerve center, noting its importance while dismissing it in the same breath. They passed her station as he waved vaguely at her direction. "That's Sergeant Brooks. Been here forever. She handles the boxes so the rest of us can do the real work." The cadets snickered. One nudged another and muttered something about the jacket. The patch caught a few eyes again. One said it looked like surplus junk. No one spoke to Elena directly. She didn't look up. Her hand moved evenly down her list, initialing next to each serial code with practiced clarity. Behind her, laughter drifted back as they moved on. It wasn't cruel, just thoughtless. She paused only long enough to straighten a loose cable tie on a crate corner, then continued checking off the item count for IR flare decoy canisters. Nothing delayed her work. Efficiency had a rhythm. She found comfort in that. By 0905, the warehouse returned to quiet. Elena walked the secondary aisle, confirming barcodes against digital entries, noting an error in an outgoing order slated for Camp Lemonnier. She flagged the pallet with red tape. Logistics didn't allow for guesswork. Her work meant something, even if no one around her understood how deeply. Her posture stayed upright, shoulders relaxed but alert. She never rushed, but she was never idle. Her radio crackled with a query from the vehicle parts depot, asking about a delayed hydraulic pump requisition. She answered in short, precise bursts, tone neutral, no wasted words. She'd already rerouted the shipment yesterday. She stopped briefly at a storage cage to scan a set of encrypted communication modules, handling them with care and noting their destination, somewhere near the Horn of Africa, she suspected. But she never asked questions that didn't belong to her lane. That had become second nature. Later, near 10 Unrarn, a junior airman passed by with a clipboard and glanced at her jacket again. He started to ask something, then thought better of it. She didn't notice. Or she acted like she didn't. Elena returned, cross-checking container seals and recording ambient temp readings for climate-sensitive gear, adjusting numbers where needed. No one thanked her. No one offered small talk. She didn't seem to mind. Her world was measured, contained, and understood. In a place full of noise, she chose stillness. In a base obsessed with performance reports and up or out promotion tracks, she stayed where she was, and no one could figure out why. But in the quiet discipline of her movement, in the smooth transitions from crate to form to system terminal, there was an ease that didn't come from training manuals. Elena didn't just know her job. She moved like someone who had nothing to prove and everything already settled. And that, more than anything, made her presence unsettling to those who never noticed how much she noticed them. At 12:20, the base cafeteria buzzed with the midday shuffle of uniforms, trays clattering, and conversations bouncing between tables. Most personnel gathered in familiar clusters, eating quickly and laughing between bites. Toward the far corner, Master Sergeant Elena Brooks sat alone with a tray of simple food and a tablet pulled up beside her, reviewing supply manifests as she ate in methodical silence. Cadet Maya Hill hesitated near the entrance, balancing a tray of her own. She scanned the tables, caught sight of Elena, and made her way across the room, ignoring the curious glances from her peers. Maya was quiet by nature, but something about Elena's composure earlier had stuck with her. It wasn't just professionalism. It was something deeper. "Excuse me, ma'am. Mind if I sit here?" Elena looked up, eyes calm but unreadable. She gestured to the seat across from her without saying a word. Maya sat down and took a quick bite of mashed potatoes before speaking again. "I was on Lieutenant Brenner's tour this morning. You work in logistics." Elena nodded and returned her eyes to the screen. "Inventory and distribution," she said simply. Maya waited, unsure if that was the end of the conversation. "I noticed your patch. I couldn't find it in any unit directory. Is it from a prior deployment?" Elena didn't look up right away. Then she reached for her cup of water and took a slow sip. "Some things don't show up in directories," she said, setting the cup down. Maya smiled awkwardly. "That makes sense. Still, you seem to know a lot more than just inventory. Your suggestion about the routing corridor during the tour, I'd never even heard of it. It's not complicated. You track movement patterns long enough. You start to see where things bottleneck. Supply lines aren't just about boxes. They're about behavior." Maya leaned in slightly, drawn in. "So you predict what a unit will need before they ask?" "Sometimes. Depends on the mission type, operational tempo, and terrain. If you've worked enough deployments, you know which items disappear first in desert rotations versus Arctic, for example. That sounds more like forward logistics planning than warehouse inventory." Elena finally looked up. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes seemed sharper. Good logistics doesn't just react. It anticipates. If you're only sending what they ask for, you're already late. Maya sat back, letting the words settle. She wasn't sure what she'd expected, but this wasn't it. Elena didn't speak like a warehouse manager. She spoke like someone who had written the doctrine herself. "Did you serve in combat zones?" "Everyone serves somewhere. I've moved a lot." Maya studied the patch again, now less curious about its design than what it might have meant. She wanted to ask directly, but something told her not to. Elena wasn't hiding. She was just choosing not to explain. "I hope to commission into intel logistics, maybe even strategic operations, if I'm lucky." Elena gave the smallest nod of acknowledgement. "Then learn the quiet things. Numbers are louder than chatter. Learn what people discard, not just what they request. That's not in the training materials. It never is." At 12:43, the overhead speakers announced the next training rotation for cadets, and Maya glanced up. Her time was almost over, but she stayed another moment, watching as Elena returned to her tablet. Her hands moved with the same deliberate control Maya had seen that morning. Everything about her was precise, not rushed, not anxious, just steady. "Thank you, Sergeant, for letting me sit." Elena didn't answer right away. Then she looked up and said, "You asked with respect? That's rare." As Maya stood and turned to leave, one of the cadets from her group caught her eye from across the room. He raised an eyebrow, clearly wondering why she had bothered. She ignored him. Something told her that patch meant more than any of them could guess. She didn't have proof. Not yet. But she trusted her instinct. And her instinct said that Master Sergeant Elena Brooks wasn't who anyone thought she was. At 16:05, the command center at Hill Air Force Base buzzed with urgency. A logistics alert flashed across the primary display: urgent delivery required to a forward operating base in northern Iraq. The request involved a specialized electro-optical targeting sensor, equipment so sensitive it bypassed standard requisition. The timeline was tight: 48 hours. Delay could compromise an active reconnaissance mission already in motion. Colonel Madison, the logistics director, stood over the digital map, flanked by Lieutenant Brenner and two operations planners. Brenner tapped a route line on the display, tracing from Hill AFB to Ramstein in Germany, then forward via Kuwait and into Iraq. Estimated delivery 72 hours. This is the fastest route under current movement protocols, Brenner said confidently. C-17 availability aligns with a scheduled maintenance part drop. Customs will clear at Ramstein. Elena Brooks stood a few paces behind the group, summoned only to confirm current inventory and movement availability. She had already done that in under a minute. Now she waited. Quiet. Arms folded loosely. Colonel Madison glanced at her. "You've confirmed we have the package in-house." "Yes, sir. In Secure Bay 3, ready for transport." "Good. Then we just need to initiate the Ramstein channel and alert that route won't work," Elena said evenly. The room stilled. Brenner turned slightly. "Excuse me." She took a step closer, her tone steady. "The Ramstein corridor routes through northern Syria. That corridor's been restricted since 1420 yesterday due to recent escalation near the Manbij area. UAV activity triggered localized anti-air threats from non-state actors. Clearance delays through Turkish airspace are stacking up." Madison narrowed his eyes. "How do you know that it was flagged in CENTCOM's open-source daily brief? Satellite intel via NIPR-net showed the heat signatures. Even the unclassified feed had the vector changes marked." Brenner crossed his arms. "That's not in the logistics distribution updates. Nothing official came down this morning. They'll issue it by 18:00. But by then, you'll already have the load sitting in Frankfurt. Customs there won't clear the manifest without secondary routing. You'll lose 24 hours minimum." Colonel Madison tapped a control pad, pulling up airspace overlays. He entered the region manually and waited as the system rendered recent flight vector anomalies. A heat map flickered over Syria's northern edge. Elena's assessment was accurate. He glanced at her again. "This information is public open source, non-classified tier. Anyone can access it if they know where to look." The ops planner beside him frowned. "Why haven't we been integrating that?" "Because most people don't." Elena didn't add more. She stepped back, letting the silence speak. Her delivery had been calm, surgical. There was no judgment in her voice, just clarity. And in that moment, the room recalibrated its view of her. Brenner looked down, then back at the map. "Well, then we'll need a new option. But nothing's been cleared for that range except—" "Let's talk about that," Elena said, already turning toward the operations panel. Her voice didn't push. It invited. And the officers, without realizing it, followed. Elena moved to the side console and brought up the CENTCOM transport overlay. The main screen displayed active mobility corridors across the region. She tapped the Gulf region and zoomed in on a node marked Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates. "We have 2 C-17s scheduled for refueling and crew rotation out of Al Dhafra tonight at 22:40 local. They're empty on return leg to Qatar. If we initiate a direct loadout and coordinate with the 816th Expeditionary Airlift Squadron, we can piggyback the equipment via priority override." Lieutenant Brenner raised an eyebrow. "That's not a primary routing protocol." "No," Elena said. "It's an adaptive routing trigger based on regional threat conditions and equipment urgency. It's written into Air Mobility Command's contingency doctrine. Most people don't use it because it requires cross-unit coordination." Colonel Madison stepped closer to the display. The sensor package is listed as priority grade under ISR support. Correct, Elena nodded. The requesting unit flagged it under mission critical for ELINT interception in Nineveh. If they don't have it in time, they'll stand down. There's no redundancy in their kit. Brenner folded his arms. Even if Al-Dhafra accepts the override, you'd still need clearance to move into Iraq from UAE airspace. That's not standard. It is, if we partner with the Royal Air Force crews embedded on the same airfield. They've been running joint sorties with our ISR wing out of Al Udeid. The clearance exists under mutual defense operations. I've seen the manifests. The room stayed quiet. Madison looked over at the comms officer and gave a nod. Make the call. If her data holds, I want confirmation within the hour. Brenner didn't move. His voice, quieter now, cut across the table. How do you even know these channels exist? Elena's gaze met his. Logistics isn't about moving things. It's about understanding where everything already is and who has the authority to say yes. I've been doing that for a long time. Colonel Madison tapped the digital map again. The route calculated Hill AFB to Al-Dhafra via direct military airlift, then forward staging to Erbil under joint clearance. Estimated arrival 45 hours. With buffer. Better than anything else on the table. Well done. Sergeant, he said. Brenner didn't speak. He looked back at the projection, then at Elena, as if trying to fit what he knew about her into the new shape forming in front of him. Elena simply returned to her seat near the console and picked up the manifest list. Her expression hadn't changed, but the room had, where before they had seen a quiet supply tech, they now saw someone else entirely. Someone who wasn't just keeping up, she was 10 steps ahead. At 09:15, the massive hangar on the east side of Hill Air Force Base had been cleared and swept for the arrival of General Marcus Harlan. Word had spread quickly that a 3-star general from Joint Special Operations Command was on site for what was being called a routine readiness inspection. But nothing about the pace of preparations felt routine. Uniforms were perfect. Formations were tight. Everyone stood a little straighter. Rows of personnel lined the floor in departmental blocks. Logistics was far off to the right, near the loading dock. Elena stood near the back of her group, slightly obscured by a stack of boxed MRE pallets. She wore the same jacket she always did. The patch was still faded, the colors worn down to washed-out grays. General Harlan entered with 2 aides, followed by the base commander and senior staff. His stride was short but deliberate. His presence silenced even the rustle of movement among the ranks. He paused to ask questions at each section flight ops, medical, maintenance. His tone was measured. His eyes missed nothing. When he turned toward logistics, Lieutenant Brenner stepped forward with a sharp salute. Logistics Division, sir. 27 personnel covering inbound and outbound operations for this base and 3 support locations. Current fulfillment efficiency is 98%. The general nodded but didn't stop. His gaze swept the rows. Then it halted. He took one more step forward and looked past the front row. For a moment, he simply stared. No words. No recognition visible to anyone but himself. Then, his eyes dropped slightly to Elena's shoulder. The patch. He blinked once. His face changed. Harlan stepped past Brenner without a word, past the commander, past the entire row. He stopped directly in front of Elena. The hangar seemed to still. He looked at her face with a kind of reverence. Then, in complete silence, he stood at attention and offered her a crisp, formal salute. Gasps were audible from 2 rows back. Maya's jaw dropped. Brenner looked like someone had punched the air out of his lungs. Major Brooks, Harlan said softly. I thought Phantom Unit was gone. Elena returned the salute, clean and sharp. Not all of us. Sir? The general's voice carried across the hangar now. Do you know who you have working in your logistics division? This woman once commanded one of the most classified operations groups in modern military history. He turned to the stunned officers behind him. Phantom Unit never officially existed, but she did, and she led them. Brenner stared at Elena, speechless. Maya's eyes widened with something between wonder and disbelief. Elena didn't flinch. She lowered her hand and stepped back into line. The general took one last look at her, then turned away. But everyone else in the hangar saw it. Whatever they thought they knew about Master Sergeant Elena Brooks had just been rewritten in a single moment. The silence after General Harlan's salute lingered longer than protocol allowed. No one moved. The sound of boots on concrete, the hum of air circulation. Even the low static from a nearby comms panel seemed to fade under the weight of what had just unfolded. Colonel Dennison, the base commander, stepped forward, his voice strained. "Sir, I wasn't aware you weren't meant to be," Harlan said, his tone even. Phantom Unit was disbanded years ago. Their records were scrubbed from every known channel. They were never here. They never wore uniforms. But they changed the outcome of conflicts we still don't publicly acknowledge. He didn't look at Elena again. He didn't need to. Maya stood near the end of the logistics row, her breath shallow, her eyes locked on Elena, trying to reconcile the quiet woman who triple-checked shipments with the idea of a covert unit commander. She remembered the way Elena handled data, the clarity of her language, the precision. None of it seemed accidental now. Lieutenant Brenner shifted uncomfortably beside the commander, unsure whether to stand at ease or pretend he hadn't spent the last week mocking the person standing in front of him. He glanced toward Elena, but she didn't look back. Elena remained still, hands behind her back, expression neutral. But inside, something turned. Hearing the name Phantom Unit, spoken aloud after so many years, hit like a low-impact detonation. It didn't knock her down. It just shifted the ground beneath her. Harlan addressed the assembly without turning around. "The work you do here matters. But never make the mistake of assuming what's visible defines value. Some of the most capable people I've ever served with preferred the quiet corners of the room." He let that hang, then gave a brief nod to the commander. "Carry on." The inspection resumed. The group moved on. Officers followed the general, snapping back to formation with delayed reflexes. A dozen sets of eyes remained on Elena, even as their bodies faced forward. By 10:04, the hangar began to empty. Maya didn't approach, but she didn't walk away either. She watched as Elena turned and walked toward the exit, her posture unchanged, but her shadow now cast differently in everyone's mind. Elena felt it too. Not the stares, but the shift, the cost of being seen again, and the truth that no matter how long you stay quiet, some ghosts don't stay buried. At 21:37, alarms blared across Hill Air Force Base. Red strobes lit up the main corridors as the security net tripped multiple breach warnings. The operations center confirmed a cyber intrusion targeting the base's comms relay. Simultaneously, perimeter sensors flagged movement along the western fence. The timing wasn't random. Inside the command center, General Harlan moved fast. Reports came in fractured systems crashing, comms intermittently failing, security cams looping feed. A coordinated breach, not amateur work. "This isn't a random attack," Harlan said quietly. He turned to Elena. "You recognize this?" Elena studied the patterns on the screen. The overlapping triggers, the timing between the network disruption and the physical intrusion. Yes. This was phantom doctrine, layered confusion, precision movement, masked the real objective behind staged chaos. "You're taking command of internal defense. Immediate." Colonel Dennison hesitated. "Sir, she's not." "She is," Harlan said, "and you're not equipped for what's coming." Elena didn't waste time. I need a 4-person mobile response team. Minimum footprint. Mobility over force. She turned and scanned the room. Sergeant Raul Torres, Armory NCO, 12 years in QRF. Specialist Maya Hill, untrained but sharp. She sees what others miss. Lieutenant Brenner, he knows base protocols, can navigate command chain resistance. They'd have to work. We'll need suppressed sidearms, tactical comms, and thermal vision optics. Assign access codes to secure corridors and bypass hall-level lockdowns. Elena said, "Get me control of door sequencing from ops, not security. I want routes locked in real time." Sergeant Torres arrived at the loading bay already strapping on a tactical vest. "You need firepower. I'm your guy." "I need judgment more than firepower," Elena replied. "You keep them alive. That's your job." Maya arrived still in her cadet uniform, wide-eyed but determined. She started to speak, but Elena cut her off. "You're my eyes. Anything out of place? You speak up, even if it seems irrelevant." Maya nodded, already scanning the gear table as she pulled on a ballistic vest. Brenner stepped in, expression guarded. "You sure I belong on this? You know how this base responds to authority, and you've seen how I work. If there's pushback, you're my in." They moved quickly through the lower corridors, following Elena's route toward the secure warehouse annex. Standard procedure would direct forces to intercept breach points at the perimeter. Elena did the opposite. She ignored the noise. "They're using a distraction approach," she said, "like we used to. The target isn't the fence. It's whatever we least expect." "So where's the real objective?" Torres asked. "That sensor array we routed this morning." "It never went out. It's still staged in Warehouse 3. That's where they're heading." Brenner blinked. "You rerouted it." "I never trust cargo visibility on unsecured manifests. We rotated it internally until final transport confirmation. You hid it from the system, I logged it manually. It's faster when you know what to watch." They reached the annex at 22:03. Elena signaled for low-light mode. No comm chatter. They moved in diamond formation. Maya holding rear angle. The lights flickered as the backup grid kicked in another layer of the breach. Total blackout was next. They moved silently, avoiding main halls. Elena read the layout without looking. Maintenance shafts, storage corridors, dead zones and camera coverage she'd memorized on day 1. By the time they reached Warehouse 3, Elena raised a fist. "Hold position." She pointed to a vented corner above the entrance. One of the grates was misaligned. She tapped her earpiece twice. "Movement inside." "They're here," she said, "and they're moving exactly like I would. Which means we're already late." "What do we do?" Maya whispered. "We go off book. Standard would breach. I want eyes first." Torres pulled a micro-drone from his pouch and sent it through the upper vent. Elena crouched, watching the feed on a wrist screen. 3 hostiles, tactical movement, no insignia, but the spacing, hand signals. Pacing, she knew it. Phantom veterans or someone trained by them. We hit fast and quiet. No full spread. Short burst discipline. They move like us, so they'll expect us to think like them. "What's that mean?" Brenner asked. "It means we don't. Not this time." Elena raised her sidearm. "Let's change the rhythm." At 22:11, the inside of Warehouse 3 was lit only by red emergency strips along the base of the walls. Shadows stretched in odd angles across metal shelving and crates. The air was still, thick with the kind of silence that follows something broken. Elena moved ahead of her team, hand signals crisp, her footsteps absorbed by the industrial rubber floor. She scanned the aisles, noting displacement, a boot print half pressed in the dust, a slight shift in crate position. Nothing obvious. But to someone trained, it screamed entry. She raised her sidearm and slipped into a side aisle. One figure crouched near a transit crate, distracted, too exposed. She approached silently, A sharp pivot, an elbow to the jaw, and she dropped him without firing. He hit the ground with a dull thud. No sound from the others. They hadn't noticed. Torres moved to secure the downed man. Maya and Brenner covered flank. Elena pressed deeper. Her eyes adjusted faster than her breath. In the far corner of the warehouse, a man stepped forward into the dim red wash of the emergency lights. He didn't raise his weapon. He just stood there, hands loose by his sides, face half-shadowed. She stopped 10 feet away. Silas. His voice was quieter than she remembered. I wondered if you'd still recognize me. You're supposed to be dead. Yeah, you too. Neither of them moved. Behind her, Maya froze in place. Torres held back. No one gave orders. No one made a sound. You breached a U.S. base. You jammed systems. You took down our perimeter. Why? He glanced to the side. Because the people who buried us are still pulling strings. And we needed proof. So, you came back to finish what? To find out if you were still on their side. Elena tightened her grip on the weapon, but she didn't raise it. The memories didn't flood back. They filtered slowly. The dry heat of Theros. The final radio call that never came. Silas yelling over the comms. Then silence. We were burned, she said. I thought you died in the collapse. They let us think each other was gone. He took a slow breath. They left us in that canyon to keep the story clean. Elena's jaw clenched. This isn't the way. No. But it got your attention. Behind her? Brenner shifted. Ma'am, hold. Silas tilted his head. You really buried it deep. Logistics. That was the point. You disappeared better than any of us. It was supposed to stay buried. He looked at her patch. Then, back at her face. You still carry it, even if it fades. She didn't answer. They'll come for you now, Silas said. You know that. The moment your name shows up on a report, someone's going to start asking where the rest of us went. I didn't ask for this, but you answered it. That counts for something. A pause. Then Silas slowly lowered his weapon to the floor. No sudden moves, no signals. Just a man no longer willing to aim at someone he once trusted. Torres moved forward, zip ties in hand. No, Elena said quietly. Ma'am, not yet. Silas didn't blink. That's the officer I remember, and you're still the same. Just quieter. Only when I'm losing. They stood in that breathless distance a moment longer. Not enemies. Not allies. Just two shadows trying to find where the light had gone. At 22:24 inside the now secured warehouse, the air felt heavier than before. The tension had shifted. No longer a firefight waiting to happen, but a reckoning that no one had expected. Elena stood near the prototype container, its black carbon casing still locked, untouched. Silas sat on a crate, wrists free, but watched closely by Torres. She kept her voice level. Start talking. Why this? Why now? Silas leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Theros was never about enemy weapons caches. It was a retrieval mission. Israeli-manufactured targeting tech had gone dark, vanished during a joint op. We were sent to pull it out. Elena didn't blink. We weren't told that. Exactly. You thought it was a deny access hit on a tunnel network, but we were walking into a layered op already compromised. We weren't the first team in, just the ones they didn't mind losing. She stared at him. You're saying command used us as cover. They needed deniability. You and our unit were invisible by design. So when things went sideways, they let it burn. Elena stepped back, her hand brushing the crate behind her. This prototype. It's the same tech. Silas nodded. Not just similar. It's the next-gen version. Same signature architecture. Some of the design markings are identical to the unit we were after in Theros. That thing you saved this morning? It's proof. At 22:26, the warehouse doors opened. General Harlan entered with 2 security officers in tow. He stopped a few steps inside, reading the scene instantly. "General," Elena said, "this mission Theros. He says it was a recovery op. Israeli tech. Is that true?" Harlan's expression didn't change. "It's more complicated than that." "Answer the question." "Yes, it was a retrieval. But your operational tier didn't have that level of clearance. Neither did I at the time. It was compartmentalized. We were disavowed," Elena said. "Left for dead." Harlan looked at Silas, then back at her. The program was being buried. Ghost Unit had seen too much. You were effective, but you made people nervous, especially after the Kabul intercept. And now you're rebuilding. He exhaled. Parts of the intelligence community are split. Some want this tech returned to its origin. Others see strategic value in keeping it buried. That breach tonight. That was one of those factions trying to reclaim control. "So what are we now?" Elena asked. "Evidence. You're something more dangerous. Proof that the story isn't over." Maya stood off to the side, quiet, absorbing everything. Torres shifted his stance but said nothing. Brenner looked between them all, realizing he'd walked into a world that had never been on the books. Silas stood slowly. "I didn't come back to fight. I came to make sure someone still remembered what we were." Elena looked at the prototype, then at Harlan. "This ends tonight, or it all comes out." Harlan gave a small nod. "You have leverage now. Use it wisely." And for the first time in years, Elena realized they hadn't failed. They had been buried on purpose. But now, the ground was shifting, and she was ready. At 23:58, the breach was contained. Security teams swept the perimeter, confirming no remaining hostiles. Systems came back online, one relay at a time. The lights in the warehouse steadied. The prototype was secured, tagged, and relocated under direct oversight. The adrenaline faded, but something else took its place. In the quiet that followed, General Harlan approached Elena with no ceremony. He handed her a personnel folder, thin, but stamped with a clearance she hadn't seen in years. "If you choose to come back, you won't be doing it alone. Phantom Unit is being reactivated. Off the record. For now. But real." Elena opened the folder. Her name was printed at the top. Below it, the word "reinstated." No title, no rank. Just a line: operational command, task element 7. Harlan added, "I've already approved your recommendations. Torres is in Brenner, 2, and Specialist Hill. If you think she's ready." Elena glanced toward Maya, standing just outside the warehouse doors, hands at her sides. She was watching, but not interrupting. The cadet had never asked for more, never reached beyond her place, but she had followed through, and that meant something. "She's not trained," Elena said. "Neither were you once," Harlan replied. Later, back in her quarters, Elena sat alone. The room looked smaller now, not for lack of space, but because it no longer held what she needed. On her cot, the old jacket lay folded. The fabric was worn thin, the edges frayed. She traced the faded patch with her fingertips one last time before folding it carefully and placing it in the footlocker. From the wall locker, she pulled out a new jacket, crisp, regulation cut, a fresh patch sewn to the shoulder. The phantom insignia, clear, unmistakable. At 01:02, she stepped into the corridor. No one said anything. But as she passed by, personnel moved aside without instruction. Not out of fear, out of recognition. She wasn't just the woman who worked in the back anymore. They had seen what she carried. Near the operations wing, Maya waited. She stood straighter now. Elena paused beside her. You still want in? Maya nodded without hesitation. Good. Then start listening harder than you speak. Ghosts don't talk much, but they see everything. Maya smiled, quiet and proud. As they crossed the airfield together, the night breeze caught the edge of Elena's new patch. It didn't flap like the old one. It held firm. She wasn't disappearing anymore. She was stepping back into the place she'd once built. This time by choice. Whatever came next, she was ready.